Hello and welcome to this video tutorial series, Getting Started with Gluware. If you're taking the test drive, you will be able to follow along using the instance set up for you. If you're interested in taking the test drive, check out gluware.com/test-drive and complete the request. Here in part 3 of using the Device Manager app, we're going to highlight using the Hoc Query to perform configuration searches and operational state checks. This can be very useful to perform troubleshooting or pre and post change validation. So let's get started. So here I am signed into my instance of Gluware. Again, from a quick reminder standpoint in this video series, the navigation between the applications is performed through the left-hand menu, and I'm navigated into the Device Manager application. I also have properly selected my organization, which happens to be test-drive-pod1. Here I have the devices that I'm working with in this instance of Gluware in this org. In this video, we're going to highlight a component of the product called Hoc Query. And Hoc Query is built into Device Explorer, and it's available from the Actions menu. And I do want to point out that although we're using Device Manager, the Hoc Query capability is available from the other device managers in Drift and Audit, and OS Manager and Data Explorer. So this is a common utility that is available and exposed through the Device Manager Action menu. So let's get started by the first requirement to get into the Hoc Query menu is to select devices. I'm going to select a series of devices here that are all Cisco iOS and all happen to be CSR 1000Vs. After selecting the devices, I'm going to use the Actions panel and click on the icon that looks like a magnifying glass over the camera, because we're kind of examining a snapshot or information that we're querying from the devices. So let's go ahead and launch the Hoc Query. So by clicking into it, it brings up the Hoc Query dialog. Let's just walk through the settings here. First of all, we are running a new query. You can have saved queries or last runs that could be stored in your history. We're going to start with a new query. Next is you have the source. And there are 3 options here, but really 2 categories. One category is to search configuration. That would be your latest snapshot, which is the latest capture of the config that Gluware has captured, or the default snapshot, which is determined in config drift. If you've determined a snapshot to be your golden config or the one you're comparing against, you can star it as to be your default. And so that is available for search here as well. The other category beyond config files is searching the device itself. If you execute a source on the device, Gluware will connect to those devices and execute the search and then the query in real time. So let's start with a config search here. So we're going to search the latest snapshot. We have the option of filtering by concept item. We'll come back to that. We're not going to do that now. And in this example, we're going to search our devices. We're going to expand off what we did in the previous demo, and we're going to search to see if these devices are configured for BGP. The query I want to run is router BGP. Keep in mind that this is generally case sensitive, so you do have to understand how case is exposed in your query and how case may be exposed in the show commands that you might be using as well. So now we have our query set up, and I've already brought in a series of target devices. One item to point out is that now that I have a set of devices, you have to enter Hoc Query with at least 1 or more devices selected. I do have the option to edit the target devices to add or remove, but in this case I'm not going to edit it, but I did just want to show you can go into this dialog and edit the devices that are going to be targeted for the query. So let's go ahead and go back. So I have my devices here, I have my query configured, and now I just execute a run query. When querying a configuration like the latest snapshot or the default snapshot, it's going to run very quickly because that config file is already in our database. So we don't have to go out and touch the network at all. It's going to be executing from the last capture. What you see here is on a per device basis, you get the match count, meaning how many times this string was matched in the file, which happens to be the config file. So I can see here that the spoke devices all have a match count for router BGP, and the hub devices do not. So if I was expecting BGP to be configured on those, that could be a potential issue. Next is you want to be able to navigate into your query results. So I can pick any one of these and click in. And a benefit you're going to see here over the config search that we saw in Device Manager is that you see the configuration here, and then you can use this search component to find the next match. So I can click the arrow once. As mentioned, there's only one match here, and I can see that this pod 1 spoke 4 is configured with router BGP AS400. So I'm good, and I can see that here. I also can use this quick switcher to navigate between the other devices that have been run. And so I can navigate over to spoke 1 and see that it also has one match, and this is router BGP AS100. So this is kind of a quick search. If you wanted to quickly cycle through the results, you could do it in that fashion. And you can always go back to the query results here. So that was our first example of a query. And as you run queries and as you use Ad Hoc Query, if they're queries you're going to repeat, you can hit save. I'm going to say this is BGP config Cisco iOS. So now if I'm going to rerun this particular query at any point, even with different devices, I can just choose it from the drop down and run it. So let's move on to a device query. So let's go ahead and back here, we'll go new query. And the source this time is going to be the devices themselves. And the filter I want to use is a show command. So I'm going to choose show command. And now you can enter one or more show commands. So I want to look at show IP BGP neighbor. And the query I'm going to be searching for, again, remember it is case sensitive, is going to BGP state equals established. I want to make sure I don't have a space there. Okay. So now we're doing a different type of query where we're going to tell the Gluware to go interrogate each device, execute one or more show commands, and then execute a query on the resulting text to look for this string. So let's go ahead and execute this query. It's going to take a little bit longer to run, in that we are actually going out, connecting to the devices, and executing the statements to complete the query. Okay, so the query is completed, and I can see that I have, based on my query, I have 3 BGP neighbors on each of my spokes. So it looks like these guys are probably in a full mesh, and I don't have any match count on my hubs. So again, if I was troubleshooting and I expected to see a match count on devices and it wasn't there, that would be an indication that there could be a configuration problem. Once again, after the query is run, I can navigate into the query results, and I see that I have 3 matches. Here's the first. That's for this neighbor, ending in a .1, remote AS1, 100 I mean. Navigate to the second one here. I got a neighbor ending in .2, that's AS200. And a neighbor ending in .3, that's AS300. So if I was spot checking and looking and expecting these would be good results. If I go back to my ad hoc query and I look at one of the hubs and I look at, if I was running the show IP BGP neighbor, I'm getting the response of BGP not active. So if I was troubleshooting and expecting BGP to be configured here, this would be something I would have to look into and pursue why that is misconfigured. So it's just an example, but again, now that I've executed this command, I can hit save. I can say BGP neighbor state. I do recommend you save your queries as you run them, because you can build out your library, and it's a nice way to have reusability as you navigate in and continue executing some of the same troubleshooting and searching. In this next and final demo, we're going to take a look at another new query that is leveraging the concept item. So we're going to do a new query on the latest snapshot, and from a filter perspective, we're going to filter by concept item. And concept items are something we haven't covered yet in the Getting Started with Gluware. They are part of the config modeling technology. With each vendor operating system, we ship a config modeling kit that has concept items that enable Gluware to look at the configuration state, but also enable configuration or the automation of making a config change on that parameter. So let's take a look at NTP, and we are going to use iOS XE. And the difference here is, instead of looking at the entire configuration, the concept item enables us to focus in on just a component of that configuration, in this case the NTP configuration, since these devices run iOS XE. The query we're going to be looking for is NTP server. We want to understand how many servers are configured on each device, and so we're going to be looking at this as a mechanism of troubleshooting and leveraging, again, concept item instead of just looking at the entire configuration. So now that we have our query built, we execute a run query, and the query has completed. And as I can see here, that each of my devices has one NTP server configuration except for Hub 2, which has 2. So if we can navigate again into the results again, I can see that my NTP server is set up to be ending in .11. If I look at spoke 1, it's also ending in .11. So all my spokes are pointing at the NTP server. If I look at my Hub 2, it is also pointing at the .11 as well. If I look at Hub 1, it is NTP broadcast. So there is no matches in terms of no peers set up on Hub 1. So if that is my expected results, I'm in a good state. If I expected, let's say, Hub 1 to be configured to have NTP servers configured, then I would see that this is probably potentially an issue. So with that, this concludes the demonstration of Ad Hoc Query. As stated before, this is a very useful utility to perform troubleshooting, to perform pre and post change verification, especially when you're looking at configured state and operational state as well. Thank you, and we hope you continue your journey in getting started with Gluware.